Our protagonist, Cao Tiu Luong, is just an ordinary college student. Due to his roommate unplugging his charging cable, his alarm didn't go off, and while on his way to school at 8 a.m., he got into a car accident. When he woke up, he found himself transported to this apocalyptic world. At first, he thought of himself as a chosen one, with divine light shining upon him. Someone who could achieve great feats like the protagonist in a novel, conquering the world. But it didn't take long for him to realize that something was wrong. The first time, he led the survivors out of a zombie trap, only to be bitten by a zombie and die. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself back at the starting point. The second time, he used his experience from his previous life to help everyone avoid the zombies, but he died from starvation due to a lack of food. The third time, he disguised himself as a person bitten by a zombie to search for food, but he was shot in the head by the military. The fourth time, he finally awakened his special powers, but after building a base, he was betrayed by his comrades and died. His subsequent attempts didn't fare any better, and his luck seemed worse than ever. This was the 9th time, and he had given up all hope. Completely resigned, but still ended up being drafted into the army. At this point, his teammates were fighting a giant octopus monster. They decided to abandon a girl named Tiu Na and the food supplies to escape and save their own lives. The girl realized she had been left behind as a sacrificial pawn but still screamed and cried for help. Tiu Luong, unable to escape this world, decided to face his fate head-on. He screamed in, like a moth to a flame, charged at the octopus. His teammates didn't understand what he was doing, thinking it was reckless to throw himself into danger. However, Tiu Luong, with the skills of a seasoned warrior, cut off one of the octopus tentacles. Thanks to this, the girl was saved and, moved by the act, shed tears and thanked Tiu Luong. But he didn't care. Rushing straight into a nearby convenience store. Upon seeing the food, he was overjoyed, devouring everything in sight like a true warrior. He took a sip of Coca-Cola to sweeten his voice, thinking that even if he died, at least he would die full, not caring for any heroic acts or saving a damsel in distress. The octopus, seeing him cut off one of its tentacles just to eat and drink Coca-Cola, was furious. It moved toward the convenience store and got dangerously close to Tiu Luong, who was completely unaware. Suddenly, his vision became blurry and unclear. When he opened his eyes again, to his surprise, he was still in the store and hadn't returned to the starting point. He wondered if he hadn't died after all. A voice suddenly rang out, denying that he had died, but explaining that he was still alive, leaving Tiu Luong stunned. A message appeared. You have activated the system. This system has not yet been fully linked with you. Code number 2333. Tiu Luong was shocked and confused. Finally, he had a system like the protagonists in other stories. He cried and hugged the system, blaming it for not knowing how badly he had suffered. He warned that if it didn't give him a reasonable explanation, he would file a complaint. The system quickly flew away to avoid his tears, then explained that it had arrived late due to a small issue. Like Tiu Luong, it had been affected by a roommate stealing its charging cable, which caused its alarm to fail. But better late than never, the system assured him it was prepared and ready. Tiu Luong asked if it had brought all the gear, hacks, and golden fingers. The system replied that this was its job, so Tiu Luong didn't need to worry. But it still had to go through the mission process. Currently, Tiu Luong was in an apocalyptic world, and his mission was to save it. If he completed the mission, he would be resurrected in the real world. If he failed, he would be completely erased. He had a total of 10 lives but had already used 9, so this was his last chance. The system emphasized that time was short, so every second must be used wisely. Immediately, a purple light surrounded Tiu Luong. The system told him to prepare for his first mission. To sell snacks and earn 50 crystals, which could be exchanged for rewards such as attributes and space area. Tiu Luong didn't understand why, as the savior of the world, he had to become a street vendor. Moreover, the system had chosen the worst location, a desolate field with only him and zombies. It seemed more like the system wanted him to become the zombies' snack instead of selling them food. The protagonist was being chased by zombies as though they were participating in an extended marathon. At this point, anyone who wasn't running and was waiting to be bitten must have been out of their mind. But suddenly, he stopped and turned around faster than anyone could blink. He remembered that he now had a system, so why should he fear these dried-up corpses? Although the system had reminded him to refer to it as number 2333, he stubbornly called it Old Second. Tiu Luong was curious about his superpowers, whether he had the agility of a cheetah, the speed of an eagle, or the strength of a bear. The system displayed a message. Strength, speed, and perception points were still uncalculated, and his storage space wasn't open yet. He only had an intellect score of 2 in a 2 square meter stall space. Tiu Luong read this but still didn't understand what uncalculated meant. The system explained that it was because he was too weak and hadn't met the minimum requirements. To improve, he needed to accumulate points and exchange them for upgrades. In short, his brain was the only useful thing for now, everything else was useless. Seeing the zombie buffet in front of him, one of them lunged to devour him, but Tiu Luong quickly dodged. He grumbled about the system, wondering why it promised assistance software. The assistance software was the piece of cloth that covered his stall. But now it was being mercilessly trampled by zombies. Realizing that the cloth was actually an upgradable item, Tiu Luong angrily ran back. On his way, he grabbed a wooden stick to use as a weapon against the zombies. He swung it powerfully at one zombie's neck, knocking it out. One after another, the zombies rushed at him. But he dealt with them swiftly, getting closer to the cloth. However, suddenly, a zombie appeared from behind, and he couldn't dodge in time. It knocked him down, tumbling him a few more times. But this accident actually helped him reach the cloth. Seeing that their prey wasn't resisting or running away, the zombies charged at him, baring their teeth as if they hadn't eaten in years. Tiu Luong, desperate, never imagined he would die so quickly. Even when he saw the snacks, he didn't feel hungry anymore. He thought to himself, this might really be the end. But then, a surge of blue light enveloped him, and the zombies stopped attacking, one by one, walking away. Tiu Luong was completely shocked, unsure of what was happening. He wondered if the zombies had gone blind. At that moment, Old Second spoke, explaining that the cloth he had treated like a rag was actually a golden finger item provided by the system, which had protected him. Tiu Luong quickly changed his attitude, treating the cloth as a precious item, rubbing it on his face in gratitude. This item could block all forms of attack, even from mutated creatures. As long as he stayed within the stall area, no one from the outside could harm him. This meant that, as long as he had the stall, he would be invincible in this world. However, the system poured cold water on him, explaining that the item could only be used 3 times a day. If he didn't complete his mission in time, the effect would expire. There was only half an hour left until sunset, and after dark, the zombies would become more active. However, this area had just been swept clean by the zombies, and there was no one left. Tiu Luong wondered who he could sell snacks to. Just as he thought of this, 3 men appeared in the distance, though their faces looked suspicious. Tiu Luong thought to himself that maybe this was a stroke of luck, as he needed someone to start his business. They, too, noticed his stall and were curious as to why there were fruit candies for sale on the street in the middle of the apocalypse. Tiu Luong quickly launched into his sales pitch, saying, "We've got everything here. Do you want to buy something?" The 3 men, seeing all the snacks they hadn't had in a long time, drooled with desire, thinking they had found some big customers. Tiu Luong enthusiastically offered them a deal. For just 50 crystals, they could take all the snacks home. The 3 men looked at each other and then burst into laughter, mocking Tiu Luong. They couldn't believe the idiot actually wanted money from them. One of them pulled out a weapon and threatened Tiu Luong, ordering him to hand over the goods, or else he would shoot him in the head. Tiu Luong realized they didn't have any money, so he grabbed the Coca-Cola bottle back, realizing he had just wasted time. The man, unable to get what he wanted, kicked over the stall. He aimed his gun at Tiu Luong, but thanks to the system's golden finger item, Tiu Luong was completely unharmed. The bullet he shot was even deflected by the cloth, hitting the man himself. Seeing their companion get hit by his own bullet, the other 2 stood frozen, shocked by the turn of events. The bald man didn't understand why the gun fired, while the bearded man thought it was because the protagonist had superpowers. However, the bald man had never heard of such strange superpowers before. The other 2 men looked back and saw Tiu Luong rolling around on the ground, clutching the torn cloth. They still couldn't believe it. No matter how they looked at it, he still seemed like a fool. They asked him what exactly he was trying to do. The young man took the opportunity to boast, implying that he was the chosen one. He didn't forget to continue his sales pitch. For just 50 crystals, you can buy all the snacks, along with a photo and autograph from me. The idol of the young generation. The two men didn't hesitate to charge at him, intending to teach him a lesson. The protagonist shrugged, resigned as usual, saying, "It's tough, but I'm used to it. I can't handle happiness." The bald man attacked first. He swung his fist at the protagonist, but it was blocked by the system's props, and a counterattack caused his fingers to snap. Seeing that the bearded man was still standing motionless, the other two urged him to quickly kill the protagonist. Tiu Luong stared at him with a cold gaze, causing the bearded man to swallow nervously, his body trembling like a leaf. As Tiu Luong extended his hand to call, the bearded man was so frightened he instinctively stepped back. The bearded man shouted in horror, calling Tiu Luong a monster, then turned and fled at an incredible speed. The other two men, seeing their friend abandon them in such a panic, quickly followed suit and ran off. However, the protagonist didn't have any intention of chasing them. He only wanted to ask if there were any other people nearby so he could continue his sales pitch. After watching the men flee, he noticed a sack they had left behind. The sack was moving, so he thought it might contain an animal. Feeling daring, he opened the sack, and something shot out. Too fast to make out its shape. Upon closer inspection, he saw it was a girl with white hair and a beautiful soul. At the sight of the girl, Tiu Luong's eyes sparkled, like a Lamborghini headlight, as he was instantly attracted to her. The girl, seeing him, acted like a hungry cat spotting food, rushing toward him. She threw a powerful punch, but fortunately, the protagonist was quick enough to dodge. Otherwise, he would have been on his way to reincarnation. At first, Tiu Luong thought she was a zombie, but something felt off. If she were a zombie, how could she move that fast? He grabbed a magazine and threw it at her, but she caught it with ease and wasn't harmed. They exchanged blows back and forth like a game of pickleball. Tiu Luong rushed to grab the cloth, but it was useless since he had already used all 3 opportunities for the day. The girl jumped over his head and blocked his path, causing him to stumble backward and fall. Her muscles tensed as if she were charging up like a Super Saiyan. Knowing he couldn't beat her, Tiu Luong started to cry while throwing snacks at her. He threw blindly, and suddenly, there was silence. When he opened his eyes to check, he saw the girl happily chewing on dried squid, looking at her satisfied face. Tiu Luong wondered if this zombie was fond of dried squid. The girl continued to approach him, but this time, her attitude was different. Her eyes were gleaming, and she was drooling like a puppy waiting for its owner to feed it. The problem now was that the protagonist had no more dried squid. Wanting to see if she would eat something else, Tiu Luong took a risk and threw a packet of fruit candy at her. She eagerly caught it and chewed happily. Seeing this seemed to be working, Tiu Luong laid the candy on the ground to lure her. However, soon, he found himself cornered, with a lava wall beneath his feet, radiating intense heat. He threw the entire bag of candy far away, hoping to trick the girl into jumping into the lava. The mindless, hungry girl jumped straight after the candy and fell into the molten pit. Tiu Luong sighed with relief, knowing she wouldn't be eating him anymore. As he turned to leave, he noticed a glowing dagger at his feet. Picking it up, he immediately recognized its high quality from the glimmer. What caught his attention most, however, was the emblem on the hilt, the emblem of the Thunder Legion. This was a notorious band of marauders feared across the apocalypse, led by a powerful evolved leader. Their underlings were reckless, using their numbers to loot and destroy with no regard for the military. Tiu Luong shuddered, realizing that the 3 men he had just encountered must have been from the Thunder Legion. But since things had already gone this far, he decided not to care. He collected the magazines they left behind, knowing they might come in handy later. Inside the sack, there was another small glowing bag. When he opened it, he was overjoyed to find 50 crystal cores. He hadn't expected to complete the task so quickly. But Old Second said this didn't count as income since it wasn't from his sales, but from what he found. Tiu Luong asked, "Didn't that zombie girl just eat my snacks? Didn't she leave these crystal cores behind?" Old Second didn't consider zombies as customers, but Tiu Luong argued that the system never specified that customers had to be human. Besides, it was already dark and he couldn't find anyone else. Old Second reluctantly announced that the task was complete and the reward was an upgrade to his stall. His torn cloth had now turned into a mobile vending cart, looking quite fancy. Tiu Luong stood there, stunned, before snapping back to reality. He touched it, realizing it was a legendary storage space. Inside, there were 4 essential supplies: water, rice, meat, and vegetables. He was disappointed because his space was so basic. Other people's systems had weapons, medicines, and even planes and cannons. Old Second explained that they were a vending system, not a weapons vault, and that he was still a beginner. His reward points could only be exchanged for trivial things like tweezers, chopsticks, soap, scissors, and pencils. Tiu Luong realized it was all very rudimentary. While the stall could block attacks, it only had 3 chances per day, and he couldn't hide in it 24 hours a day. He realized that the most important thing was to improve his self-defense. So he asked the system to exchange all his points for physical strength. The protagonist and the system exchanged a gaze, both wanting to admire each other for a long time. As Tiu Luong touched the mouse, he found that nothing had changed. But Old Second didn't care. It announced a new task: in 24 hours, earn 100 crystal cores and hire a staff member. Tiu Luong was furious at the large number of crystal cores he had to collect, and the idea of sharing his stall with someone else. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew a piece of paper straight into his avatar. Upon closer inspection, it was an advertisement for a bubble tea shop across the street. Tiu Luong remembered the girl who used to hand out flyers at school and even invited him to try free samples. He wondered how she was doing now and if she was still alive. If he could work with such a beautiful girl, just the thought of it made him feel ecstatic. Motivated by the thought of her, he happily pushed his stall toward the bubble tea shop. However, he didn't notice that the girl he had trapped earlier, who had fallen into the lava pit, had somehow jumped back out unharmed. She looked around, searching for him, but couldn't find him. Her face showed disappointment, and she ran off shortly after. I don't understand what kind of push he gave, but it wasn't until the next morning that he finally found the cafe. Upon seeing the surroundings in ruins, he pushed open the door to check if anyone was inside. Inside, there were 4 zombies, not humans. The young man politely closed the door again, not wanting to disturb them. He realized these were the same zombies he had encountered the previous day. Once again, the young man fled in panic. They weren't just any zombies, they were dangerous ones. Chasing him while panting heavily, one of them lunged toward him, but was knocked back by the system's equipment. The block function could only be used 3 times a day. So the protagonist decided he couldn't afford to waste it. The zombie, thrown far away, landed in a pool of blood, but a green light surrounded its body, and it slowly began to move. It was no longer a regular zombie, it had mutated, still able to move by flipping its body despite having broken limbs. Now, it moved even faster than the other zombies chasing him. It tried to bite his leg, but fortunately, it missed. Enraged by the cheap tactic, he kicked it, and to his surprise, after upgrading his strength, he found himself with incredible power. One kick sent the zombie flying several meters. The soft drink stand was indirectly knocked over by him, landing right in the midst of the remaining zombies, who then disappeared from the Earth's server. The young man was stunned, lying flat, unable to believe that he had caused this. It turned out that the strength upgrade was real. Thanks to killing the first zombie, the system awarded him a new player gift pack, a one-time-use raincoat, made from high-tech materials. It not only repelled water and kept warmth but also blocked all harmful substances. Wearing it, one could swim in radioactive water without a problem, but it could only be used once. The protagonist was skeptical about the magical raincoat, which looked like a piece of plastic fabric. But suddenly, at that moment, a swarm of zombies appeared. The noise must have attracted them. Now, there was no way out. Suddenly, someone called out to him. It was the girl from the cafe flyer. Noticing the sound coming from the protagonist, the zombies turned in unison and charged toward him. At this point, the best strategy according to Sun Tzu's 36 strategies was strategy 37, running. After running into the house, the girl immediately closed the door. blocking the zombies from following them. The young man panted heavily, feeling exhausted, because without her, he would definitely have been in trouble. The girl asked, "Do you know me?" The protagonist explained that she used to come to his school to advertise bubble tea and even invited him to try it. Of course, she didn't remember, as he wasn't a charming guy. But he pretended to remember, saying things that didn't make much sense. The blonde girl switched to the beautiful soul strategy, saying she was glad to meet him again. She introduced herself as Guy Cam and referred to the protagonist as Luong Ca. This was the first time in his life that a girl called him older brother, and not only that, but she was a beautiful girl. The young man couldn't hold back his emotions and began to cry. The blonde girl next to him was completely confused. Suddenly, a soda can rolled out, and the protagonist suspiciously asked, "Who's there?" Holding a soda can in his hand, filled with doubts, he suddenly heard a noise coming from behind the door. He reached out to open it, but the blonde girl screamed loudly, "There's a rat." This made him stop in his tracks. She ran over and placed her hand, filled with warmth, on his, making him let his guard down. He was then led away to deal with the rat, so he didn't get a chance to see what was behind the door. Inside, a pair of bright red eyes were watching their every move. As they walked, the blonde girl suddenly collapsed, fainting. The protagonist panicked, unsure of what had happened to her. Guy Cam explained that she had been stuck there for 5 days with nothing to eat. The protagonist thought it was something serious, but hunger was something he could easily solve. He rushed to the food stall to prepare something for her, unsure whether to make noodles or dumplings. He thought wings and Coca-Cola would also work. While he was busy preparing the food, he didn't notice the angry look on the blonde girl's face. She quietly approached the food stall and looked over everything, eggs, noodles, and even cooking oil. She wondered how he managed to gather so much food. She thought to herself that he was an easy target, and now, she had struck gold. She picked up an egg, but it immediately returned to its original spot. She tried again, but the result was the same. Because the snack cart's ingredients couldn't be stolen. Without the shopkeeper's permission, anything taken would automatically return to its original place. The blonde girl stared at it in disbelief. Could she be imagining things because of hunger? But first, she needed to deal with the protagonist, who seemed smitten with her. Then, all the food would be hers. Just as she was about to make her move, the knife she had hidden at her waist suddenly disappeared. She was confused until the protagonist asked, "Are you looking for your knife?" She screamed that it was hers, but how did it end up in his hands? The reason was that when she fell earlier, he had quickly taken the knife without her noticing. He explained that he had simply borrowed it for cooking and didn't mean any harm. Guy Cam smiled on the outside but secretly wondered how he knew she had a weapon. Was he always on guard? To win the protagonist's favor, she decided to use the crocodile tears tactic, saying that in the apocalypse, this knife was an essential tool for a girl's protection. The protagonist, naive and trusting, believed her without hesitation. He reassured her that after using it, he would return the knife to her. Before handing it back, he kindly advised her not to use it, as it was too sharp. But as soon as he retrieved the knife, she suddenly turned and attacked him. She charged at him with the knife, but it was immediately knocked away by the system's protective measures. Despite his repeated attempts to reason with her, she refused to listen, so the protagonist had no choice. At that point, Guy Cam was stunned and realized the protagonist must have some special abilities. Since her true nature had been exposed, she decided to go all out for a final confrontation. She leapt into the air and kicked at the protagonist with all her might. The young man, however, calmly pulled out a can of pepper spray and sprayed it directly in her face, causing her to react as though she had just eaten something extremely spicy. Guy Cam rolled on the ground, writhing in pain from the pepper spray in her eyes. The protagonist remarked that if she couldn't handle spicy food, he would make sure to pay more attention to his guests' preferences next time. First, it was chili, then mustard. She lay on the ground like a fish out of water, begging him to stop. He didn't care and continued adding more spices, casually calling out to the people inside the room. The door swung open, and to his surprise, 2 little children rushed out, leaving the protagonist stunned for 5 seconds. The 2 kids, their noses still runny, held wooden sticks and charged at him to protect Guy Cam. The protagonist grabbed the 2 kids by the collar, scolding them for skipping school and forming a group to harm others. The blonde girl saw her subordinates captured and scrambled to stop the protagonist from hurting them. The protagonist released the two kids, just as the girl had requested. As a result, all three of them ended up in a heap on the ground. Inside the room, there were quite a few necessities. From instant noodles to cookies and canned food. It seemed that many people had been deceived before. However, Guy Cam had never made a mistake until now. Why had she been caught this time? If anyone was to blame, it was the previous victims for being so gullible. The protagonist easily recognized her tricks. She had said she'd been stuck there for 5 days with nothing to eat. Yet there was still liquid in her can, clearly opened not long ago. Moreover, there were fresh bloodstains on the floor, but no wounds on her body. So the answer was clear, there must have been other people who were either injured or dead here. After saying this, even the protagonist felt a chill. Realizing how close he had been to becoming one of them. The two kids argued that the people before them deserved it. They had never deceived good people, only tricked bad ones like the protagonist. Hearing this, the protagonist felt a sting in his heart, wondering what made him a bad person. In this chaotic world, everyone just wanted to survive, so it was hard to blame the three of them. After hearing their reasoning, the protagonist felt a little sorry but decided to let it go. Now, they were in his hands, so he couldn't really blame them. Looking at the blonde girl holding the knife in his hand, Guy Cam and the two children became fearful, unsure of what the protagonist would do next. He said he hadn't had fresh meat in a long time and joked that it looked like he was about to enjoy a delicious meal. The two kids screamed, thinking he wanted to eat them. The protagonist smirked, pleased with how he had scared them, and warned them not to judge a book by its cover. Just because he looked bad didn't mean he was a bad person. The blonde girl also believed he was going to eat people and begged him to let the children go, saying that if he wanted to eat, he could eat her instead. The three of them, fighting over who would be eaten by the protagonist, didn't realize it was all just a joke. Seeing the three tricksters bond like this made the protagonist feel like a true villain. Suddenly, the little girl started coughing uncontrollably, causing concern in the other two. It turned out that she was injured, and if she was tied up too tightly, she couldn't breathe. At first, the protagonist thought they were trying to trick him again by loosening the ropes and then stabbing him. But the little girl's coughing grew more severe. Seeing her genuine expression, he couldn't help but admire her acting skills, better than Guy Cam's. But they weren't lying. This was real. If left untreated, the girl would surely die. The protagonist ordered the system to check her condition. After a moment of scanning, the system reported that the girl had a severe infection in her body, with pus and signs of infection. If not treated promptly, she would only live for another 3 days. As soon as the system finished, the little girl coughed up a mouthful of blood. The protagonist was shocked. And though he didn't want to believe it, he had to. Immediately, he cut the ropes and released them. The other two rushed to support the little girl, who was still bleeding from her wound. The protagonist recognized that the wound was caused by a gunshot. Who could be so cruel as to treat a child this way? Guy Cam screamed that it was the Thunder Legion, then began to recall her past. The children's mother was a regular customer at her shop. When the world descended into chaos, their family was buying milk tea at her store. Upon seeing people fighting in the streets, she immediately sensed something was wrong and swiftly locked the doors. Soon after, news spread that the zombie virus had broken out, and everyone was advised to stay indoors. As a result, the customers decided to remain in the shop. At first, everyone was united, encouraging each other and waiting for help. However, as time went on and food started to run low, the true nature of some people began to show. They aggressively took food from others, claiming that children didn't need to eat as much as adults, and that 3 people could share one meal. The children's mother begged the man to return the food, explaining that her daughter was sick. But he looked at the frail child and said that eating would just be a waste and that it would be better to give his portion to someone else. The boy, wanting to protect his sister, lunged at the man and bit his leg. The man pulled the boy away and was about to throw him aside. Fortunately, Guy Cam intervened just in time, causing the man to stumble and allowing the boy to escape his grasp. She scolded the man loudly, asking why he thought it was acceptable to steal from others when food was already scarce. The man angrily shouted back, claiming that a small piece of bread wasn't enough for anyone, asking if she wanted them all to starve to death. He cursed the shop, saying that just because she generously gave him bread didn't mean she owed him anything. He then told her that if they wanted better food, they should go outside and find it themselves. He insulted the weak, saying only those too afraid to fight zombies would bully children and women. His words struck a nerve, and the man had nothing left to say, only shouting insults in return. Other customers in the shop began demanding more food. One even promised that after the chaos ended, they would repay her double. But this was a milk tea shop, not a supermarket. And there was only so much food available, all of which had already been given out. A girl loudly asked, "Then why is the door to the other room locked?" "What's inside?" Guy Cam explained that it was her changing room, and there was nothing inside, but the woman didn't believe her and insisted she open the door for them to see. The group continued to argue irrationally. Despite having no authority, they demanded that she open the door to prove there was no food inside. Only the mother stood by her side, explaining that if it hadn't been for Guy Cam's kindness in letting them stay, they wouldn't have made it this far. But the ungrateful people thought that if it weren't for her meddling, they could have returned home and waited for rescue from the government. Seeing their ingratitude, Guy Cam coldly laughed, telling them that if they wanted to leave, they were free to go. However, the three of them suddenly lunged at her, preventing her from stopping the man from breaking down the door. As he smashed the door, he threatened that if he found any food inside, she would regret it. After some time, the door was opened, and inside were only clothes. The man questioned, "Isn't this a milk tea shop? Why are there so many dresses here?" The old woman and the other woman, seeing there was no food, began accusing her of being immoral, claiming that with so many clothes, she must be trying to seduce men. Just as the verbal altercation escalated, the door was suddenly smashed open. A jeep crashed into the shop, and the logo of the Thunder Legion was displayed on the vehicle. A man with a missing eye stepped out. The people inside the shop panicked, not knowing who these newcomers were. They introduced themselves as the Thunder Legion and warned that if they didn't hand over the food, they would not leave alive. The ungrateful man, who had only bullied children and women, immediately blamed everything on Guy Cam when faced with stronger opponents. The men from the Thunder Legion's eyes lit up when they saw the women, giving lecherous grins. Guy Cam grabbed the woman and the two children, trying to escape, but one of the men grabbed her. Cornered, Guy Cam pulled out a dagger from her side to fight back. The man was stunned to see that this seemingly weak woman had been hiding a weapon. In his rage, he pulled out his gun and prepared to shoot her. However, the sick girl suddenly lunged forward, taking the bullet for Guy Cam. In this moment, it was clear that the child, still alive, was braver and stronger than the ungrateful adults who only preyed on the weak. The trio, Guy Cam, the boy, and the mother, watched in horror as the scene unfolded, their hearts aching as they saw the girl fall, blood spilling from the wound. The man cursed his team for the gunshot noise, which would attract zombies. Since things had already gone too far, he casually shot another person and ordered his teammates to withdraw quickly, while taking all the belongings in the shop. The others also killed the man and the elderly woman. When they were about to harm Guy Cam and the two children, the mother rushed to push the gunman aside, buying time for the three of them to escape. Although she was struck on the head and blood was pouring out, she didn't care about herself, only wanting everyone to survive. She begged Guy Cam to take care of her two children, Tiu Lak and Tiu Lin. Reluctantly, the three of them had no choice but to break the glass door and flee with the children. The mother saw a grenade near a soldier's feet and immediately pulled the safety pin, choosing to end everything together. Guy Cam had promised the mother to protect the two children, and in order to survive, she could only take this action. However, Tiu Lin's condition was getting worse. Seeing the frail child lying on the ground, she couldn't hold back her tears, feeling both guilty and blaming herself. But Tiu Lin, understanding, comforted Guy Cam, telling her that she wasn't in pain and that if she died, she would reunite with her mother. The other two reassured her that she wouldn't die, and since their mother was gone, Tiu Lin was the only family left for Tiu Lak. After hearing their story, the system felt pity for them. But when they had planned to kill the main character earlier, it had shown no mercy. That being said, in this chaotic world, carrying two children wasn't just a burden, but also brought unnecessary trouble, increasing the risk of death. Guy Cam had managed to survive this long, which could be seen as a sign of her conscience. In the system's space, there were medicines, but to use them, the advanced space function had to be unlocked. At the moment, the main character's authority was insufficient. He planned to trick the system into revealing the medicine, but it immediately realized he was trying to deceive it to help him upgrade his authority. It could easily detect his scheme, showing that it was quite clever. However, there was another way, which was the second function of the snack shop. Food made by the owner had medicinal effects. But the effectiveness depended on the level. The higher the level, the better the result. With the main character's current level, he could only rely on luck. Even if it was a game of chance. Like rolling dice, he had to try it. Looking at the limited ingredients on the counter, he wasn't sure what to make. After thinking for a moment, the young man finally decided on a dish. He immediately got to work, cracking eggs, kneading dough, and seasoning. After a while, a chocolate cream-stuffed egg cake came out of the oven. Holding the hot cake in his hand, he reassured the three of them that it was not poisonous. This was the egg cake the main character had loved most when he was little. He gave it to Tiu Lin to try. The little girl hadn't had such a sumptuous meal in a long time and smiled brightly, saying, "Thank you." After eating a few bites, her eyes brightened and her body seemed to no longer be in pain. She was able to stand up straight. Guy Cam checked and found that the fever had gone down, and even the wound was starting to heal. She realized that all of this was thanks to the egg cake made by Tiu Luong. She asked him what he had put in the cake because there was no medicine that could reduce a fever so quickly. The young man took the opportunity to boast, saying that full recovery would still require eating his cake over a longer period of time, but next time he would definitely charge a fee. Guy Cam immediately agreed, saying that as long as it could heal Tiu Lin, she would give him all the supplies in her room. However, food was the one thing the young man didn't lack. What he truly needed was her. After hearing this, the two children jumped up, calling him a scoundrel and accusing him of having ill intentions toward their boss. The young man was speechless, not understanding what these two children were thinking to say such things. He simply wanted Guy Cam to work for him at the snack shop, and he would take care of her food and accommodation. Although he didn't know much about Tiu Luong, getting free food and lodging in the apocalypse seemed like a good deal. The three of them immediately agreed, but with one condition. They wanted to bring Tiu Lak and Tiu Lin with them. The young man's face darkened, realizing he had made a wrong decision. Guy Cam drew up a labor contract. And even though this was the apocalypse, everything still needed to be clear. He read the contract while sweating and suggested that she might as well take paid leave right away. Not to mention, the treatment for the child laborers would need to be calculated separately. While they were discussing the contract, suddenly a strange voice interrupted, attracting their attention. The door, which had been cut open by an electric saw, was pushed aside, and four large dark men walked in. One of them drooled when he saw Tiu Lin's soft-boiled egg cake. He reached out to snatch it, but Guy Cam and Tiu Lak quickly stepped in front of her. The young man, standing across from him, thought a fight might break out, but instead, the young man was simply offering his goods. He smiled, rubbed his hands together, and introduced himself as the owner of the snack stall, asking what the customer would like to eat, promising to make it for him. The man turned to his boss, saying he wanted to try the food. The boss remained silent for a moment, then walked over and asked the price of the egg cakes. Tiu Luong assessed that these people didn't seem ordinary, and they likely had plenty of crystal cores. With this opportunity, he planned to fulfill his mission. He handed them the menu, and they were surprised to see that one cake cost 10 cores. But what could they do? In this apocalyptic world, everything was traded with life, and this price was already quite cheap. The boss agreed to buy 10 cakes. The man with the rooster comb didn't forget to threaten that if the cakes weren't good, he would smash both the person in the stall. Seeing the young man's annoyed expression, they were about to argue, but luckily, Guy Cam intervened with her sweet and calm demeanor. She gently pulled on the boss's arm and asked him not to be angry with her boss because he wasn't very good at talking. When the boss saw her beauty, his anger immediately faded, and the atmosphere around them became filled with a soft, sparkling pink glow. Taking advantage of the moment, she touched his chest and complimented him, saying he must be very good at fighting zombies, making him blush deeply. The lackeys nearby couldn't help but laugh at their boss's usual weakness around pretty women. And even more when he started stammering. Everything was smoothly resolved by Guy Cam. Now, Tiu Luong just needed to focus on making the cakes. It was definitely the right choice to hire her. The young man entered the stall with a serious expression, and after a few quick motions, the delicious aroma of the cakes filled the room, making everyone's mouths water. Soon after, the cakes were ready, and they devoured them eagerly as if they hadn't eaten in ages. Meanwhile, Tiu Luong and Gai Kam watched anxiously. The result was better than expected. And even the boss couldn't help but exclaim, "This is incredible." The others, while eating, started tearing up, reminiscing about the taste of cakes they had as children. The boss, impressed by the young man's cooking skills, generously tossed a bag of crystal cores toward him. He then asked if there were any other items on the menu besides the egg cakes. Seizing the opportunity to cater to a big spender, the young man introduced his other snack items: fried chicken, skewered meat, spicy frog soup, grilled squid, sausages, and more. After listing everything, not only the soldiers but also Tiu Lin and Tiu Lak were drooling. The boss ordered 10 of each item. However, the young man only had flour and eggs. To make these other dishes, he would need more ingredients, and they were hard to find. The boss asked what ingredients he needed, saying they could get anything. Gai Kam whispered to Tiu Luong that these people might be traitors. In this apocalyptic world, they could provide ingredients, so the snack stall wouldn't have to risk searching for them. It seemed improbable, but it made sense, so the young man changed his attitude and decided to cooperate long-term with the boss. If they could get a good price, it would be even better. And in exchange, the boss's group wouldn't have to pay when they visited the stall. Hearing the two call the boss, the owner, made the group burst into laughter. They said their boss was a businessman without capital, which left the two confused. Suddenly, the boss turned to ask his subordinates, "Why are the A Tiger group so late?" As soon as he finished speaking, another vehicle arrived at the stall, and a man got out to report that the A Tiger group had been injured. 3 of them were helped inside, beaten and bruised. The young man recognized them as the ones who had tried to rob his stall earlier in the story. It turned out they were all members of the Lightning Strike Legion. The boss asked who had beaten them so badly that even their parents wouldn't recognize them, but they didn't know. All they could say was that the kid running the food stall claimed he had been chosen by the heavens. Upon hearing this, the boss thought the kid was just making it up. That kind of thing only happens in novels. There's no such thing as someone being chosen in real life. And even if there were, the person chosen would definitely have to be from their Lightning Strike Legion. The men who had been beaten up didn't believe it at first, but the kid was strange. Every attack they made was deflected and then sent back at them, as if they were getting hit by popcorn. The boss asked if the kid was a supernatural user. But none of them had ever heard of such a power. Gai Kam, after hearing this, realized it was indeed a very unusual ability. Then she remembered having encountered a similar situation earlier. Thinking back to their words, she wondered, could it be this young man, Tiu Luong? Looking over, she saw him sneakily playing cards, which confirmed her suspicions. The boss's face turned as dark as a burned frying pan, and he shouted, "No matter who he is, anyone who dares touch someone from my Lightning Strike Legion will die." Gai Kam, Tiu Luong, and the 2 children were all shocked when they heard the name, Lightning Strike Legion. Gai Kam stepped forward to confirm whether the boss was really the leader of the Lightning Strike Legion. They casually admitted it, thinking their legion had become quite well known. The boss, now speaking more kindly to Gai Kam, said he would protect her stall and accept her previous offer. However, the 2 children were enraged and began cursing at them for not only hurting their sister but also indirectly causing their mother's death. The boss picked up the 2 children, not understanding anything they were saying. One of his men suggested it was a misunderstanding since the Lightning Strike Legion was a group of thieves, but they had never harmed women or children. Gai Kam wasn't convinced by this excuse and immediately attacked. The boss dodged her blow and tossed the 2 children aside to avoid them getting in the way. Gai Kam continued to strike relentlessly, but the boss only evaded without fighting back. The rest of the group just watched, commenting that Gai Kam was indeed very skilled. But their boss couldn't bring himself to hit women. The boss became frustrated, seeing his subordinates doing nothing but spectating. The 2 kept exchanging blows fiercely, unaware that a giant octopus monster had appeared on the ceiling above them. Seeing that the humans weren't paying attention, it began lowering its tentacles to approach them. After watching for a while, Tiu Luong realized that instead of worrying about others, he should focus on his own safety. The system's props had already been used twice, once to block zombies and once to protect Guy Cam. There was only one use left for today. To avoid injury, he needed to quickly return to a safe area. The two men who had been beaten up recognized Tiu Luong and shouted that he was the one who claimed to have been chosen by the heavens. Upon hearing this, the boss became furious, threw Guy Cam aside, and charged at Tiu Luong. She was held back by the biggest member of the Lightning Strike Legion, unable to do anything. The boss was enraged. Not only had his subordinates mocked him, but his crystal cores were also taken. He had never been humiliated like this before. Tiu Luong, sweating nervously, explained it was all a misunderstanding, but the two men told the boss not to listen, saying that Tiu Luong was a master of deception. They admitted they had been foolish for underestimating him. The two children immediately defended Tiu Luong, insisting that he was far stronger than their boss. Guy Cam added sarcastically, "The boss over there may seem strong on the outside, but inside he's weak. He's too shy to even hit a woman." Hearing these words, the boss became so furious that it seemed smoke was about to rise from his head. Tiu Luong, realizing that he didn't fear strong enemies but rather foolish teammates, braced himself. To test whether Tiu Luong was truly as strong as claimed, the boss swung his massive fist toward him. The punch was so powerful that it shattered the ground beneath them. Fortunately, Tiu Luong managed to jump back just in time to avoid the blow. The red beam of light showcased the overwhelming power of the punch. The boss radiated a terrifying murderous intent. Even the solid cement floor shattered with a single strike. The two children, now truly frightened, thought he might be a monster. The power of a supernatural user was already monstrous by nature, and Loi Hong was the strongest among them. Tiu Luong realized that even if he wasn't directly hit and merely brushed by the punch, his bones would undoubtedly shatter. Seeing the young man frozen in place, the boss continued his assault, taunting him by asking if he was some useless weakling who could only avoid confrontation. Then, the boss concentrated all his strength into another punch. This time, Tiu Luong didn't dodge. He raised both hands to block the blow. However, the result was that he was slammed into the wall, coughing up blood. The boss grudgingly acknowledged that Tiu Luong was indeed stronger than an average person, as he took a hit without turning into a pile of broken flesh. The two children were concerned that if Tiu Luong died, they wouldn't be able to benefit from him anymore. But Guy Cam thought that if the boss died, everything on the cart would belong to them. Tiu Luong wasn't sure if these people were his employees or just thieves. They were already wishing for his death to inherit his business. Even the employees seemed to hope for his demise. Loi Hong thought Tiu Luong was just a madman who had read too many novels and believed in the idea of being chosen by heaven. Once again, Tiu Luong was slammed into the wall like a gecko, his stomach wound bleeding profusely. He thought that whether he dodged or faced the attack head-on, he wouldn't be able to inflict any harm on the boss. There was no chance of winning. However, if he could use the system's tool, the stall, it would be a different story. The stronger the attack, the greater the backlash. With this one opportunity, Tiu Luong didn't hesitate and rushed toward the stall. The boss thought the young man had finally stopped running and was now daring to face him like a man. Not realizing that Tiu Luong had something else in mind, the young man slid past him to dodge the punch, and in the process, accidentally yanked down the boss's pants. The boss, Guy Cam, and the two children were all stunned, while the members of the Loi Hong Legion couldn't contain their laughter. Tiu Luong was overjoyed that he had outwitted the boss and reached the stall. However, after pulling his pants back up, the boss became even more enraged and was determined to kill Tiu Luong. Tiu Lak suddenly noticed a knife hanging at the waist of the man who was holding Guy Cam. The boy rushed between them, shoved his sister aside, and grabbed the dagger. Without hesitation, he charged toward Loi Hong to avenge his mother. Tiu Lin and Guy Cam were stunned, not expecting Tiu Lak to act so boldly. The man who had helped the boss earlier now drew a weapon, directly contradicting his previous claim of never harming women or children. In order to protect the boy, Tiu Luong pushed the stall toward him. The system's tool intervened, and a bullet shot off in another direction. Tiu Luong now had to face the boss of the Loi Hong Legion without the system's help. He thought that although he had a chance to become the main character, this might be the end. It all depended on the actions of those young children. Just as he prepared for the worst, a massive explosion suddenly occurred. The person who appeared was the white-haired girl whom Tiu Luong had tricked into jumping into the lava sea at the beginning of the story. She was the perfect heroine, incredibly beautiful. Just as everyone had expected. As soon as she landed, she charged forward and kicked the leader squarely in the face. He took the blow without saying a word. Their eyes locked, each wanting to deliver a punch that would truly hurt. However, his attention was soon captured by the girl's striking appearance. Realizing she was a woman, he blushed and stood frozen in place. The protagonist also recognized her. She continued her assault on the leader, landing a punch that sent him crashing into the wall, causing a massive explosion. The henchmen couldn't believe their eyes when they saw their leader go down. They wondered where she had come from. Two of them recognized her as the girl they had previously captured and stuffed into a bag, referring to her as a mutant. Hearing the word mutant, the Thunderbolt Legion immediately drew their weapons and opened fire. Despite the heavy gunfire, the girl easily dodged the bullets. Her quick movements made it clear she wasn't an ordinary mutant but rather a mutated one. After evading the attack, she jumped onto the protagonist's stall. One of the henchmen lunged forward to strike, but the protagonist, panicked, begged them not to damage his stall. He quickly pushed the stall aside, allowing the girl to effortlessly avoid the blow. The henchman who had taken the most beatings from the protagonist drew a large weapon, clearly intent on seeking revenge. Before the protagonist could stop him, the henchman fired. The girl, unfazed, jumped down and adjusted the stall so the grenade flew through without causing any damage, making the protagonist silently give her a mental thumbs up. The grenade exploded against the wall, sending debris flying. The leader, who had just crawled out of the rubble, didn't have time to react before a piece of wood fell and hit him on the head, leaving his subordinates stunned. With a small lump on his head, he asked his men, "Where were you aiming? What kind of shot was that?" His subordinates were completely confused. The leader of the Thunderbolt Legion grew even angrier and ordered his men to attack without mercy. The Thunderbolt Legion immediately opened fire again, targeting the white-haired girl, the protagonist, and the two children. Despite the imminent danger, the protagonist was still concerned about his stall being damaged, which left Guy Cam feeling helpless. However, the protagonist's true plan was to use the distraction while the Thunderbolt Legion was occupied with the mutants to escape with the children, not to stay and take the bullets. The loud voice of the boy caught the attention of the white-haired mutant girl. When she turned and saw the four of them running away, leaving her behind as bait, her cheeks puffed up in frustration. She picked up a metal rod and swung it like the Monkey King's staff, blocking all the incoming bullets. The rod struck the black man, causing him to drop his gun. The gun discharged wildly, firing randomly. The four of them hid behind the stall to avoid the bullets, while the remaining henchmen fled in panic, resulting in a total self-sabotage. After a while, the gunfire finally ceased when the ammunition ran out. The Thunderbolt Legion breathed a sigh of relief, seeing the shooting stop. However, they no longer saw the female mutant. With no movement or sound, the group of children cautiously peeked out. Just as they were about to flee, suddenly, the girl's upside-down head appeared, her mouth wide open, as though she were ready to strike. The four of them were so terrified that they immediately ran away from the stall, fearing they would be bitten by the mutant. The girl, still confused, didn't understand what was happening. They didn't realize that the creature on the ceiling was watching their every move. Only the girl noticed something was off. She rushed toward the protagonist, making him panic, unsure why she was only chasing him. At that moment, the creature began to act. It extended several sticky tentacles from the ceiling. One shot directly toward the protagonist as he ran. The girl immediately jumped in front to block the tentacle, protecting the protagonist. As a result, she was caught by the tentacle, which tightened around her, pinning her in place. The creature then dragged her forward, leaving the protagonist in shock. It seemed the creature wasn't interested in eating mutants, so it threw her forcefully against the wall. The creature no longer hid on the ceiling. It dropped down into the room where everyone stood. Its enormous form appeared before their astonished eyes, an octopus-like creature with dark, nearly black skin and eyes glowing bright red, like the headlights of a Lamborghini. Recognizing it as a mutated creature, Thunderbolt immediately ordered his subordinates to open fire. However, the gunfire had no effect on the creature whatsoever. The four protagonists took the opportunity to check on the female mutant's condition. She lay motionless in a pool of blood. Guy Cam realized that she had been protecting the protagonist earlier. He couldn't understand why she had defended him. At that moment, she shakily opened her hand, revealing a candy wrapper that the protagonist had given her. He recalled their first encounter. He asked if she had intentionally come to give him this. Seeing her lips move slightly, Tiu Lak wondered if mutants could understand human speech. The protagonist then had the system analyze her. Indeed, there was some mutation in her body. Certain types of mutations could restore a portion of brain function, leading to intelligence levels similar to that of an animal or a 4 to 5-year-old child. Looking at the girl's body lying in the pool of blood, Guy Cam felt that she seemed to be in great pain. He had assumed that mutants, being undead, didn't feel pain anymore. He wondered if they only died when their heads were destroyed. Tiu Lin cried, saying that the girl was a good mutant, one who didn't bite people and even saved the protagonist's life. She didn't want this beautiful sister to die. Even though she was a mutant, if her spine were broken, her life would be over. The protagonist felt 3 parts responsible, but 7 parts like it was his fault. After consulting the system, the protagonist was informed that in order to heal another creature, he would need to complete a task to earn a special item. He agreed, and the system immediately issued the mission. He had 24 hours to obtain a level 2 energy core, equivalent in value to 100 regular energy cores. And it could only be found in evolved mutants or mutated creatures. In other words, he just needed to defeat the octopus-like creature. Back to the battle between the Thunderbolt Legion and the giant octopus that had just escaped from the pot. The creature was so enormous that bullets couldn't penetrate its thick skin. One of the soldiers bravely stepped forward with a grenade launcher. This time, he succeeded in hitting the target, but the creature blocked the blast with its tentacles as anticipated. The soldier confidently declared that if it didn't explode this time, he would give up being human. However, after a long pause with no explosion, his teammates started to question if the grenade launcher had run out of ammo. Suddenly, the creature's eyes snapped open. It began chewing the grenade as if it were a snack. While the soldiers stood stunned, 3 of them were hit by the creature's tentacles and thrown aside. The octopus then spat out a thick green slime, hitting several soldiers and causing them severe pain. The leader shouted for his team to move away, warning them that the slime was corrosive. Without hesitation, Loi Hong grabbed a large piece of the wall and used it to shield his men from the venomous spit. However, the creature continued to lash out with its tentacles, and as more green slime poured out, even the wall began to dissolve. The soldiers realized they couldn't hold their ground for much longer and urged their leader not to worry about them. The leader, much like the close-knit comrades of his team, refused to let them die so easily. As he braced himself to endure the octopus's attacks, he was caught off guard when another of his men was grabbed by one of the creature's tentacles. Watching his teammate cry out for help, the leader cursed loudly and activated his mutant powers. Blood rushing, he charged at the octopus, ready for a one-on-one showdown. He leapt onto the creature, aiming to season it as if preparing a hot pot. But the slimy mucus made it nearly impossible for him to get a good grip. Seeing this, the creature tossed him aside and coated him in more green slime. Just as it seemed like he was about to be overwhelmed, the protagonist, wearing a cloak, appeared out of nowhere. He dashed toward the creature's tentacles like a marathon runner, completely unaffected by the corrosive slime. His eyes glowed a bright green, reminiscent of the Super Saiyan blue form from Dragon Ball. The remaining soldiers stared, confused and amazed, wondering how he was able to remain unharmed. Was he a mutant? The leader, however, immediately dismissed this idea, as the protagonist showed no signs of possessing any mutant abilities. The leader began to reflect on what the protagonist and his men had said earlier, and a realization dawned on him. Could it be that the protagonist was truly chosen by fate? The reason the protagonist could dodge the attacks with ease was the cloak he wore, an item that provided a boost to his strength. With this, the young man wasn't afraid of the creature at all. He jumped forward, holding a dagger, not to attack the octopus, but to stab the grenade's fuse. After completing his task, he quickly leapt back to avoid the blast. The octopus, unaware of what had just happened, continued to hold the grenade in its mouth. A few seconds later, a massive explosion erupted, causing chaos all around.